Hey 3DMJers, this is Andrea Valdez, and you're listening to the 3D Muscle Journey podcast. This is Q&A session 17, and it is our 170th episode. As we do every 10 episodes, this is an audience-supplied Q&A session where we do our best to answer and provide advice and perspective to some of your specific case studies and queries. So today, we'll be doing just that with two of our team's head coaches, Alberto Nunez and Brad Loomis. All of the questions from this episode came from the case study Q&A page on our website, which you can always find at 3dmusclejourney.com/QA. And if you're one of our newsletter subscribers, you'll always see a giant button at the end of each monthly email that tells you to click here and ask the coaches, which takes you to that same Q&A page to enter your submissions and give us as much or as little context as you'd like along with it. You can sign up for that monthly bulletin on our website. Just go to 3dmusclejourney.com, click on the newsletter tab, and we'll start sending you a roundup of everything our team of coaches and specialists make at the end of every month for free. Anyway, now that you know where to submit for the next one of these, let's get back into today's podcast. Topics covered in this show will include what to do when you miss a training session, how to correct asymmetries between right and left sides of the body, how to hit bulking calories and what to do if you occasionally fall short, how our coaches handle a bikini prep versus a bodybuilding prep, when to enter a long-term cut versus a mini cut, the differences between a ready-made program versus a customized program, the benefits of coaching for athletes who are already structured and consistent with a ready-made program, how to handle post-cut weight gain, and a whole lot more. As always, if you have any feedback or comments on this particular episode, head on over to our website or to our YouTube channel at youtube.com/team3dmj and leave it under podcast number 170. Let's get into it. Here is Q&A session 17 with Brad Loomis and Alberto Nunez. Our friend Barry asks, what do you recommend if you miss a day in your training program? I currently have a pretty tight work schedule and have 4 very specific time slots for when I get my 4 training sessions done per week, but once or twice a month, the occasional work or family event causes me to miss one. Should I just skip that session and pretend it happened, or do you recommend pushing it back to the next time I go to the gym? I just worry that if I push it back, then my deload will come every 5 to 6 weeks instead of every 4 weeks like I planned. Thanks, Barry. Brad, why don't you hit Barry up with some answers?
Sure. Well, first, thanks, Barry, for asking. We appreciate that.
Yes, we do.
And you know, my advice for Barry is a reflection of myself. I used to worry about this quite a bit, you know, when I was in my lifting career, but I don't worry as much about it anymore. And that's kind of my advice to Barry, is to say, you know what, you're going to be doing this for a long time. And so now I look at my, 50 weeks a year times, 20, 22 and a half, 23 years now. And those one sessions that I missed or that I pushed back, they just all kind of come out in the wash, right? So really the answer to this question in a nutshell is yes. You can skip it and pretend that it happened. You can push it back to another day. Really, it's just a matter of what kind of works best in your brain and what you're the best with. Myself, a lot of times, I just go with it. If I miss that day, I'll just pick that up and kind of pick up right where I left off the next time that I'm in the gym. Plus, it kind of gives it a little bit of a fresh look to it instead of every Monday being, my strength day, or, when I was running, body part splits, instead of every Friday being leg day, Well, now that leg day kind of got bumped to maybe a Sunday, and now it kind of bumps things around a little bit and it kind of shakes things up and, kind of makes it a little bit fresh. But yeah, that's something that I know I used to stress over quite a bit. And hopefully, between what I've given Barry and Bert, the knowledge you're about to drop on him, we can make him feel a whole lot better about that.
Go, Bert. Man, that was your cue.
Barry. Yeah, no, exactly what you said, Brad. It's like it's not like this happens all the time. I think if it were a chronic issue, and it'd be one of those things where like, hey, let's address how you have your work organized, because this is just not fitting with the rest of your life. But one time thing, it doesn't really matter. But I guess to dissect it a bit further, just because this is probably an issue that, on average, with most folks, I end up when we end up working together, I end up taking about a training day off, like on average. Like that's like if they're doing 6 days a week, it's like we go down to 5. They're doing 5, we go down to 4. And just in my experience, I think most people progress the best over the long term, training about 4 days per week. If it's really well put together, because again, it's not always what you're willing to do. Yeah, the gym is fun, but once you hop on the gain train long enough, you're like, oh, okay, this 4 day thing is I can see what it's doing for me, especially recovery wise, and especially when everything in your training week has a well thought out purpose. But I'm kind of getting away from the question itself, and that's it. Okay, let's just say their system is set up just fine. It's not like he's. I guess I just get in my head. I'm like, man, are you training like 6 days a week or something like that, or like missing one day? Because if you're training 4 days a week, you have these 3 roaming off days, and that's one of the main reasons I like it, is because it's pretty pliable. It's pretty pliable in the sense that, hey, if you get one of those nights where you have 3-4 hours of sleep, it's cool. I train 4 days a week. Let me just switch it around, and it doesn't really bother or disrupt things too much. But it's usually those like what is it? Those push-pull leg fanatics that have the hardest time with that. Where it's like it's not like it's not push, pull, rest legs. It ruined their whole like scheme. So yeah, I'd say maybe something to consider. But generally speaking, I don't know. Like one day isn't really going to disrupt things too much. I find myself more and more these days also writing programs where we kind of abolished we don't go by the Gregorian calendar necessarily.
Yep.
Right.
It's sometimes because like that in itself kind of crams you up sometimes to do the things that you want to do. So yeah, Barry, I guess just be a little bit more flexible, and but then also at the same time you're gonna have to be, if you're gonna do this for a long time. You're going to have to just learn to be flexible, adjust, be okay with things not always going exactly 100% according to plan. But at the same time, just make sure that you're not. I hope you're not training 6 days a week, because like that's.
Yeah, he trains 4. He says he trains 4, but he has 4 like specific time slots.
Okay, got it. Okay, that makes sense. Okay. Nevertheless.
Bert's here. We're good. Okay. We're good.
Well, it was going to help someone else out. So
it was. You're right.
Right.
We're just learning how to think about our training days.
So yeah. I honestly, and I'll tell you what, I started to kind of take a page out of Jeff's book. This was like back in like I think 2012, 2013, where every once in a while something would happen, and it would disrupt my week a little bit. And quite often, especially as when you've been going at it for a while and you're just able to generate so much more stress with every session, sometimes when you have an extra day off, you just get back to like where you would have been if it bothers you, like or that's what I usually would do anyways.
Yeah.
I'd feel like really refreshed, and then I'd have a good training session, and then it got me more and more thinking like, I'm not gonna be totally mad when I have like these like 3-day weekends or something like that. So yeah, grand scheme doesn't mean a whole lot.
Okay. So like Brad said, the answer is yes. You could just leave a hole in your spreadsheet for that day. Or like you said, Bert, instead of sticking to like, I go Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, whatever, it's day 1, day 2, day 3 or whatever. And then it doesn't have to be so on the week. And also, like Brad said, you were like, just whatever makes you feel best. Or what'd you say? Whatever makes you feel most accomplished?
Yeah, whatever. Yeah, whatever works best for your brain and kind of makes you feel like you're accomplished and you're getting your training done. And with Barry, he's got 4 very specific days where he gets his training done. There's nothing wrong where if that one's a hole, well, now your Monday is now your upper power day, or it's your hypertrophy day or something like that. It's kind of a nice little change to where you're not always locked into that same schedule of Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, or, what have you.
Also, plot twist. Brad, haven't you done this whole checklist thingy? Couldn't he move an exercise or two to the next 3 sessions if he has the time? I don't know.
Yeah. Kind of move things around a little bit and kind of freshen things up that way. Yeah, that would be something. If he's only got those 4 days, those specific days to train, just hurry up, get in there and get your compound movements in, or maybe just one movement if that's all you got time for, and then just take all your other exercises and tack them on the end of the other 3 days. And yeah, you can kind of get all your work done that way. I'm a big fan anymore of just kind of like Bert said, just kind of taking the caps and the bottoms off of this 7-day Gregorian calendar week. Right. I set myself up for success, and to give those push-pull leg guys a little bit more help. You got 6 days of training. Give yourself about 8-9 days to get it done. Take those caps off and just kind of always get them done in a 6 to 9 day period. And you're going to find that all of a sudden this light bulb is turned on. It's like, why didn't I think of this before?
And also, that was a really good point. Taking 8 to 9 days to get your 6 days in sometimes is fine. But also, he says, I worry if I push it back, then my deload will come every 5 to 6 weeks instead of every 4 weeks. But if you also take the cap off of your 4-week main cycle, and if your 4 weeks does take 5 or 6 weeks, it doesn't matter because that's the same amount of volume got done before the deload. Yes.
And about the same density, give or take. It's not that big of a difference. But also, there's no hard rule that says you have to deload it before. You might be scheduled that way, but yeah. But I'll tell you what, I don't want Barry to think either that we are.
That we're hey,
don't worry about it, bro. Because it's whatever. Because I've been through, there's one hot streak in particular. I went 3 years. I remember age 20 to 23 where I did not miss a scheduled workout or a scheduled meal. Yeah, was that required? No, not necessarily. But at the same time. It was part of my thing. I was dedicated to my craft. So at the same time, there's a lot of empathy, and I get it that he just wants to stay hot, and there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, I would be the person that's I couldn't have a hole in my spreadsheet. That wouldn't make me feel good. Pushing it back would make me feel better.
Yeah. Yep, I'm the same way. I got to get that check mark kind of checked off. I can't have an empty square there.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm just not going to grandma's birthday. That's all. Hey.
That's Bert. He's trying to get that streak back.
Yeah. Bert's hardcore.
So, but I think the main takeaway that makes me happy though is you're whatever makes you feel most accomplished, because I think acknowledging that the way you feel about it fucking matters. That's all. Not just matters, but matters more than a lot of other things, to be honest. Because all of those literal days and volume movements can be fine, but whatever you're fine with is what. Cool. All right. Great work, friends. Question 2. Yeah.
Let's do it.
Okay. This is from Alex. Hello. I've been training for 14. He did have that exclamation, by the way. I didn't just make that up. Hello. I have been training for 14 years now for football, powerlifting, CrossFit, and now bodybuilding. I have what I would call major asymmetries from left to right side. I did suffer a few injuries to my left side, including a bicep contusion that resulted in loss of tissue, quad tear, and probably a few concussions and neck injuries. I've also been told I have mild scoliosis. Shout out to Brad's squad over here.
Yeah.
I have managed pain in my training well and can now do most exercises without pain. However, I have a huge difference left to right. My left arm is nearly an inch smaller than my right. My left is 1.5 inches smaller than my right. Oh, left leg is 1.5 inches smaller than my right. Also, when I'm lean, you can see the muscular difference between the left and right sides of my back. I've been using dumbbells and many unilateral exercises. Is there anything else you would recommend? Bert, kick us off.
I'm gonna let Brad kick this off because he's got my man chills in the hospitals.
For those who don't know, also Brad is very crooked. He is
very crooked. Yeah, and it really shows up when I prep and I'm lean. It really shows up. My hips are out of whack, and
tell him why. Obviously you have your conditions, and we can start with that. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, because I've got scoliosis, pretty severe lumbar scoliosis and also thoracic scoliosis. But shoot, that's not that throws my asymmetry off. But that's not the worst of my medical issues. I've got that. Good Lord, my 50-year-old brain. That spondylolisthesis.
There you go.
That's really the one that could put me down. At any time if I'm not on top of things. And really, for the most part, I just kind of train through them because I don't think really there's that much I can do about it to like straighten out my spine. My hip's going to always be a little bit higher on the one side than the other side. And when I'm really, really lean, that one hip's going to be, a little bit more high than the other one. And it just shows up when you're really lean. My shoulders are going to be always just a little bit out of whack. I don't think there's anything that I can do to fix that, But the nice thing is even though my lifts are kind of ugly, and when I squat, the bar comes up kind of crooked. I mean, Bert can kind of attest to that. Looks like I'm going to kind of fall over sometimes. I've never fallen over. I still managed to stand up with it, and I'm still getting stronger, But with Alex here, I think, we're talking about a guy that's been at it for 14 years now. So this is not, this is a pretty high level guy that's trained for a long time. And he's either leaving his novice years or he's solidly an intermediate, know? And so, I if I had a crystal ball, I would be willing to say that these deficiencies are going to close a little bit. Probably not as dramatically as like a novice or a beginner. When you have a novice and a beginner and they have an injury and they have an obvious asymmetry from one side to the other, the weak side that always ends up catching up eventually in the coming years. Even if you really try to attend to it and use unilateral exercises, I mean, that I guess kind of helps. But, in a parallel universe, there's the guy that doesn't do anything. He just keeps training and it just kind of closes up, But when you're 14 years in the gym and he's done powerlifting training, he's done CrossFit, he's done football. I think these are kind of things that might end up being just like changing your eye color, I think you can really try and sometimes cause imbalances in movements and things like that would be worse than the asymmetries as far as the visual part goes. But, I think that the best you can hope for is to try to get those things to close up a little bit. And then just most importantly, keep to your training. Because I think it will close up even if you don't purposely do anything about it. Just like most kind of beginners and novices. Bert, you probably are a little bit more privy to Eric's asymmetry on his delts. But remember, he used to hammer. I think it was his left delt all the time. He would do those leaning kind of side lateral raises and things like that. And it seems to me, you correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems to me that he kind of admitted that really didn't do too terrible much. But you're probably more privy to that and can elaborate a little bit more.
Yeah, his clavicle, something happened at some point to his clavicle on that side. And he realized he just didn't follow in this direction. He's like, oh, like what happened here? So it probably had something to do with that. And but I tell you what, it's like he notices it, and but most
I've
people
never
don't
noticed that, by the way.
Yeah,
never.
Yeah,
on Eric.
So a lot of these things are so much more like obvious to us, and I think people when they probably see this dude, because hey, just look at his athletic background and the fact that he's been lifting along, they don't necessarily think like 1.5 off that leg. It's more like this is a jack dude, like so. Yeah, and we all, I think everyone. I think obviously in his case it's a little bit more prominent, but most everyone kind of knows we have a favorite side for almost every muscle group, like left to right. And it zigzags back and forth, and it's annoying, but at the same time, it's like you're really the only one that like notices.
Yeah,
that.
and like not to minimize it, especially how he feels about it, but like. If I was missing 1 inch on my arm right to left as a 5'2" female, right? But he's 6 foot 215. So 1 inch is actually like, I don't know.
It's a smaller percentage.
Yeah.
Okay, that was all. It's like we're not trying to minimize, but like you said, it is anything wrong with us is a bigger deal to us, and also like, well, at the same time saying like your problem's valid though, and like we appreciate it and all that stuff.
Well,
one thing I can
you gotta
say
be
that
thankful for what you do have. Like he's probably hella jacked at this point. Like he's probably definitely doesn't look like a noob just based off those like the metrics that he's given us.
Yeah.
So the big part of it is like I think just appreciating what you do have. I think that's because the only possible solution is like clear cut that we can do. It's like literally sandbag the strong side. But do you really want to do that? Are you really gonna enjoy your training as much if you're literally can let the stronger side of your body just like atrophy intentionally? I don't think we could like that's the one surefire way. But I mean.
Well, and when you say, Brad, when you say that they'll even themselves out or whatever, what you're saying is like if a person has a genetic, not if, everyone has a genetic limit, right? That as you get better and better, more and more experienced, more and more trained, the progress will slow as far as adding size. But what you're saying is like one side will hit that ceiling or that, what is it, that the much slower growth rate before the other side will. And so that's how they will eventually even out is what you're saying, right?
Pretty much. Yeah. I mean, we see this a lot. You know, my son, when he broke his ankle, his calf turned into goo, you know. He got his leg out of that boot and he's like, Dad, feel my calf, you know. But now you can't even hardly tell, you know, that because it's caught back up again with all of his training. Now, one thing that I can recommend to Alex is I've noticed that a lot of times asymmetries tend to hide themselves when you gain weight.
Okay.
And you've got a better chance of picking up muscle through your training, especially on your weaker side if you're putting on weight. Because I mean, 6 foot, 215, I agree with Bert. That guy's probably pretty jacked and he's probably fairly lean, you know? Yeah. Maybe go through a good cycle where you're putting on. I mean, 215 at 6 foot, shoot, maybe get up to 225 or 230, you know? And then, you know, once you might have forgotten about your asymmetries by the time you get there. But then you can always kind of lean back down again, you know, if you want to get more health issues going. And then maybe a lot of those deficiencies will have closed by then, like we were talking about.
Okay. Or what were you going to say? I feel like I interrupted you a little bit ago.
No, I think that's what we have. Yeah, I mean, you could see a PT. I think he talked about that. I think sometimes, hey, someone might be able to just bring certain things back in line, you know, beyond what you've been able to on your own and through your own research. So that's definitely something.
After an injury, sometimes we use our limbs differently than we did before. I know that. That happens to me too. It would help.
Know all about that.
It might help to see someone to make sure, like now, like you might not even know, you might not be as crooked as Brad, but you might not be able to see unless you're in a mirror some of the compound movements that you're doing crookedly. Because I've been there. I have one foot that's always behind the other when I back squat. I didn't notice till like the last 4 or 5 years. You know, if I don't feel myself, I feel like I'm straight. So it could be that. Maybe also he says I've been using dumbbells and unilateral exercises, but this might be something you're already doing, but making sure you're doing isolations too and not just I don't know. Not waiting for
your
compound.
body can get so good at compensating things.
Yeah.
And
very good, yeah.
And improvising, especially on the compounds. Like I have my right ankle is not as pliable as my left ankle because I've sprained it so many times. And it's something I have to watch out for. And I can see it, like literally my right foot will line itself up a little bit like further ahead of the right one. And I have to scoot it back in.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Here's another thing I can say from experience, though, is if you try to make yourself straight without proper, I don't know, like that actually made my injuries worse or has. Like if Brad tried to make himself squat straight, he'd be all kinds messed up. Yep. Because his back is crooked and that's how he performs his compound lifts. So it is tricky to try to change your form on compound lifts too, because that might not be it. But it seems like when we do think of, like for when we think of hypertrophy in general, even when it's not asymmetries left to right, when it's asymmetries like we're trying to get our upper half to catch up to our lower or whatever, as a practice and as a company, it's always like, or not always, usually through isolations. Correct? Okay.
Yep.
Where we can. Word. All right. Moving along. Question number 3. This is Jeff, not Jeff Alberts, but a different Jeff, I would imagine. He didn't submit his own question to us. Okay, Jeff asks, I'm bulking right now and I'm aiming to get about 3,500 calories per day, which is sometimes difficult for me. If I miss a day and undereat, should I be adding the extra calories to the next day? Short and sweet question, similar to our first question about training, but how should he handle when he doesn't hit his bulking calories?
Bert, this is perfect for you.
Come on, Bert.
I'd say, man, again, like that freaking context thing, man. I hate it. Wish I just had answers for people. But I think if it's like about a 10% difference or something like that, it's like, don't sweat it. And then also I think like the more, the bigger you are, like the more body fat you have relative, it sounds like he's gaining, and he's been gaining for a minute because it's been an issue. And if he's falling behind, I'm thinking he must be at healthy body fat levels, right? You're just less susceptible to, like, you know how it goes, like when you're dieting hard and you're leaner, it's like, hey, if you're used to eating every like 4 or 5 hours and it's been 7 hours, you're dying, and I can see that stress carrying over to like the next training day or training that very same day or something like that. But in this case, I'd say as long as it's reasonable, like I personally tend to just be like, whatever. If it's maybe something where I fell asleep early and there's a whole like 1,100 calories like missing from that day, that's one of those where I'm like, okay, well, I'm gonna probably try to make up for it to some extent. But again, like within reason, especially when you're in your full house state, I don't think it's that big of a deal if it happens, here and there. You're so much more resilient when you're hormonally like in tip-top shape.
Right. And also, what would y'all say, like when he says, if I miss a day and undereat, like, and you're saying, well, I wouldn't worry about it too much, but like how often will that have to happen for you to worry about it?
I say a few times a week. Yeah. If it's
okay. So once or twice a week, even you're like, meh, no big, as long as it's not too crazy. Okay.
Yeah. I think a few times a week, and that's when it starts to perhaps, it can impact how productive that week is, both in regards to how well you're able to stimulate, how well you're able to adapt. But yeah, and I think we all have weeks like that every once in a while. But as long as it's not a chronic thing, I wouldn't worry too much. And everyone has slightly different thresholds depending on where they are at, both in their training age, and in regards to like where they are at, in regards to their like body fat and how things are looking there. So yeah, I'd say personally off season, I probably have one day like that a week where I'm like,
just can't make it.
And then we usually still do okay. So yeah, something happens, I fall asleep. Or sometimes I'm just like, I can't, like I'm gonna be so full that I will not be able to sleep well. And one deal I do make with myself, if that is the case, it's something where I'm just on purpose going to short myself for the day. So I'll make sure to at least have my protein that would have gone with like for that meal, So I'll make my day's protein, and then whatever fat and carbs would have gone with that last meal that I'm trying to avoid, I'll let myself slide on that.
Okay. Anything to add, Brad?
Yeah, I'm just going to kind of take Bert's words and I'm going to kind of put them into more quantifiable, measures.
Okay.
Because obviously at 3,500 calories, that's a surplus for the guy, right? How much of a surplus? I mean, he didn't say. But if we take that 3,500 calories and multiply it by 7 days in a week, you get 24,500 calories. So if dude's maintenance is, say, 21,000 calories, and he's short by 1,100 calories on one day, guess what? He's still at 22,600 calories for the week. That's still a surplus. right?
Yeah.
Anything, if maintenance is 3,000 calories a day, that's 21,000 calories a week. 22,000 calories a week is a surplus. 23,000 calories a week is a surplus. Anything above 21,000 is surplus. So you can just kind of let that go, But, I'm sure that Bert has days where, he's really, really full and he can't eat anymore. But you know what? I'll bet you there's a few days there where he's really busy. He's really, really active. He's out there throwing around, Haley and Polly. He's training, and he's hiking. And those days, he's probably a lot hungrier,
Yeah.
And so he might eat more on those days than that 1,100 calories maybe he gets in on the next day. I mean, that would be fine too.
Yeah.
But anymore, with us, especially when it comes to bulking, I mean, do we have to quantify things that meticulously? You know what I mean?
Right.
I mean, we can, but I'll be honest, I ain't doing it. I'm not tracking my food. I'm adding my protein up in my head, and pretty much my rule is I'm never hungry. I'm never hungry. My stomach is never growling, and every time I eat, I want a slight food baby. And that's all there is to it. And then my feedback loop, instead of being calories, is kind of what's the weight doing on the scale. Mm-hmm. After about 3 weeks, if I'm still the same weight, well, you know what? I better have a Thanksgiving Day food baby after each meal instead of just a slight food baby, and just kind of be a little bit less meticulous about quantifying things in the numbers and just kind of go by your fullness levels, the number of meals that you're eating, and then if you need to eat more food, you can always kind of go with the sweet and salties and the cheesies and the stuff that stimulates appetite to get even a little bit more food in there when you feel like you are stuffed and boy, that really tastes good. I want more of it.
Yeah, no, that's a good point though, because at the end of the day, the goal isn't to eat a certain amount of calories. The goal is to get bigger.
Yep.
And just like opening that up is like, oh yeah, it's not that the 3,500 number is, I mean, you can think of it as a goal, but if you take a step back and like, oh, my long-term goal is to put more muscle on over time, then it is, it might make it easier for you to have just that feedback loop on the scale every so often. So good point. Mm-hmm. Good point, Brad. We good? We're good with that one?
Yeah, I'm good.
Well, I guess one last thing.
Let's do it.
And that's just that. So when you go on a fat loss phase, you're purposely under eating, right? And you still manage to recover. So if for whatever reason, like, hey, like these last 4 weeks, you've had 4 or 5 days, it worked out that way, where you're probably in a deficit. It's probably, like how Brad mathed it out. It's not going to make a big difference. Because, again, most people, man, they hop on their little fat loss phase. They're so excited, so amped. And it's like they're hitting PRs the first few weeks most of the time. Like, they continue some of that momentum, right? So,
right.
So yeah, not a big deal.
Okay.
Yeah. It's those spreadsheets. It's like, as long as you're not one of those athletes, not going to say names, but every once in a while you get one of those where you're like, if I showed your spreadsheet to someone, they couldn't even tell what numbers you're trying to hit here, right?
Right.
Yeah. So as long as you're not playing that game, we're good.
Hi again. Just wanted to remind you guys that we have a pretty giant video library of educational materials at 3dmjvault.com. The Vault is a place we can organize our best information, pair it with some of our favorite resources, and share it with all of you in one online database. We have courses on contest prep, hypertrophy, posing, fat loss, postseason recovery, and a whole bunch more. A lot of it is free, some of it is for purchase to help support this podcast, and we continue adding pieces of updated content to it every couple months that members always have unlimited access to. Once again, that's at 3dmjvault.com, and we really hope you like it. All right. Question 4. This one's a little longer, so I'm gonna read the whole thing, and then I'm gonna kind of paraphrase it a little bit because there's like 1,000 questions in it, but I'm gonna try to get to the gist afterwards. Okay, here we go. This is from Emma. Emma is a bikini competitor. She says, I was hoping you could address how long bikini athletes should train before they compete, how much cardio they usually get, how low is too low to get their macros, popular training splits, and how much they should gain off-season, et cetera, et cetera. I hear so many comments about how bikini athletes should never gain too much weight. And while I'm hovering at 10% above stage weight, I know really popular coaches say no more than 6 to 8%. love your podcast. We'll cut that out. Okay. I love your podcast, but talking about bikini would be great since we don't have to get as lean. Our posing is a bit easier other than the whole high heels thing. And there's a huge emphasis on glute training. Anyways, thanks for your consideration. My bikini team loves your podcast. Thanks, Emma. But since that was a lot, I'm gonna paraphrase here and just kind of ask the coaches, what are the ways that you would coach, train, and plan for a bikini athlete versus a female bodybuilder? Like, are there differences in approach to training, nutrition, and planning? If so, what are they? So let's take the bikini athlete for all the reasons she said versus, say, a bodybuilder where the goal is absolute leanness, absolute size, all that stuff. Take your time. Let's go.
Bradley, break this one open.
You know, actually, I was going to throw this to you, Bert, because you actually have a bit of a case study in one of your athletes that competed for the first time, did okay.
Yeah.
She looked good,
Yeah.
you know. Then took like 2 years off, if I recall correctly. Came back, won her pro card, dramatically different physique. The all-important glutes were a lot more fuller and a lot more defined. You have a really good case study. I was actually going to throw this to you, if you don't mind.
Sure, yeah. When we recomped during that prep too, I remember that. I'm seeing the start pictures versus, and I'm like, oh wow, we actually gained muscle as this thing proceeded. So, yeah, I personally would probably have, had we, it was one of those where it's like, oh, the file just makes it onto your desk, and you're like, all right, well, let's do it, because if not, she might go somewhere else, and I'm afraid in regards to like how that's gonna end up. And actually, what was said in this question, it reminds me why I was afraid of like where she might end up based off like some of these very specific figures that were given that I have heard before.
Yeah, it is interesting, right? How there's bikini coaches that claim that bikini should be handled a certain way versus
Or everyone else, right?
Yeah.
So I guess let's just start with the prerequisites. Like before, like you hop up into a prep. Like I just think, you know, again, like you need to have been a gym rat for a while. You know, like this is just something you do. You feel weird when, you know, when you're not on point with your stuff, when you're not eating your protein, when you're not eating, you know, your fruits, your vegetables. You know, when you don't hit the gym like 3, 4, 5 times a week, like that's just what you do, and you need to have done this for like 3 years, and it's like really, really automatic. A few successful fat loss phases, as well as, you know, you should have gotten like a lot of, I'd say after 3 years, you're going to get a good chunk of your gains out of the way in most cases.
And you're talking any division, right? You're not saying that
Any
should have been,
division,
so
yes.
Bodybuilding, bikini, figure, physique, male, anything. You just like a good at least 3 years of this.
Yes. Yeah. At least 3 years of living the lifestyle, so to speak. And I think above anything else, like the number one reason is just because it's more so the mental part of this, you know? Because even for someone who's been living the lifestyle, it's like, you know, and they've been a gym rat and they're running around like almost so lean that people think they always have a show coming up. Like, do you take that person often? And after they're done with their prep, they're like, whoa, that was even harder than I thought. That was nuts, man. Right? So you take this, you know, wide-eyed child that's like literally like 9 months in, and they're making some progress, but they think this is their ticket to like take it to that next level. And you put them through that, you know, not only might they never come back for a contest prep, but you might have just like completely ruined this whole like wonderful lifestyle / hobby. You know, they you know, they might have enjoyed from here until, hey, like the last day on Earth, right? So yeah, I think same prerequisites in regards to like how long we wait before we hop on that stage, and I'd say okay, so that's the same. I will say that there's certain body parts, glutes, in bikini that are, it's like you don't want to get on that stage with glutes being like glaringly weak. So we are a little bit more proactive than we would have been, say with other classes. You know, if I have a male bodybuilder, Glutes do still matter, but nevertheless, if the glutes are kind of a weak area, there's probably other things that I want to focus on. If they're also urgent needs as well. Because like in bodybuilding, I'd say it's shoulders, lats, and quads like go a long, long way. So every division does have that, and you should like keep that in mind. And that does seem to impact the training a little bit. But big picture wise, especially drug free, it's like, like even current quads, like in the IFBB, like in regards to like what is the current standard. Like I look at those quads and I'm like, okay, yeah, they've told these girls to like tone down the quads because of the fact that wellness is in now. So it's like we're not looking for as much quads in our bikini athletes. But I look at those quads and I'm like, holy crap, like those quads are still quads,
Yeah.
And even like the softer look, I'm like, and even that for a drug-free bikini gal, like we're still freaking gonna have to push you hard to get to this like kind of softer look. So, and again, whatever happens like in the IFBB, well, that just trickles down to all the other like federations that also have that same class. So yeah, we go just as hard on you for sure. It's just more so of like hey, maybe a little bit more glutes. And then I guess also, yeah. So
well,
anyhow, yeah.
Sorry, I was gonna say also like this idea that you can always, especially with glutes, like it's hard to separate the shit that glutes are good at with weak legs. So like,
Yes.
that I always thought like, we all know that like squats and deadlifts will build your ass. Well, it's like, you can use more weight for your glutes if you can do this lift heavier, which will be helped by stronger hams and quads too. So it's like, the isolations that we talked about for hypertrophy is, I guess, it's a little different when we talk about glutes because you can't leave the compounds out if you really want to hit the glutes.
It's like, how do you have a big back? I mean, without, and you want to avoid your biceps. You want the biceps to stay kind of the same. It's like, oh, you just made this harder than it needs to be.
Yeah. But continue. Sorry.
Yeah, no, so honestly, like drug-free, like to get the look, like you have to maximize everything. Like when I look at like the top-notch bikini gals, the top-notch like figure gals, bodybuilding or physique, kind of depending on what federation you're in. Like these gals, honestly, like if you were to tell them to just like don't pose, just relax, just like let it hang. It's like they all kind of look the same,
Yeah.
Maybe the bodybuilder has a little bit more of a bicep vein going, but that bikini girl got a little bicep vein too.
Yeah,
so,
if you've seen a hella lean female bodybuilder do a bikini pose, it looks great. Is what you're saying, right? Like,
yeah. I've had figure chicks. I'm like, come on, just for fun, hit a back double bicep, and it looks tremendous. So and especially in the drug free side, it's more about what you identify with as a female competitor. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think I just want to reiterate what Bert said in those early years. I think, in my opinion, it's always a shame when like that young guy or that young gal kind of gets in the gym for the first time and they just start to make those muscular gains, and they're still basically a beginner. They've been in the gym 6, 8 months, 9 months, and they see the noticeable changes, and then for whatever reason, either they decide, oh, well, I'm going to up the game and get on the physique stage or the bodybuilding stage, the bikini stage, or, God forbid, some coach just comes up and snatches them up and says, hey, you got what it takes to be a star,
Yeah.
And they just snatch all those gains, because they immediately start dieting. As we know, even beginners, they're not going to maximize their potential of building muscle if they're in a deficit and they're dieting, right?
Right.
And so, yeah, I got to just reiterate what Bert said. Spend 2 or 3 years in the gym, if nothing else, just to maximize those newbie-ish and beginner and novice adaptations to resistance training. Why waste your time? I think back to my early years and I'm like, damn, I should have waited until like 2007 to compete,
Yeah.
Because I had a lot of beginner years there that I could have probably made a lot more, gains if I would have just ate and not dieted year after year after year.
Same.
And so, I just kind of wanted to reiterate what Bert said and just put a little bit more of the reason why, you should do that. Just set those competitive aspirations aside just because you only live that way once. Those adaptations only come around really one time, and you don't want to waste those, those years. Those pageants and those shows and, all the bodybuilding stages, they're not going anywhere. It's going to be there. And so get the most that you can out of your early years, and then you can always diet, and then when it comes to dieting, let's face it, most bikini competitors are obviously, well, not obviously, but they're smaller humans, right? And at some point, their calories are going to get very low. And so there's going to be probably some expenditure that's going to happen. At some point, you're going to have to do quote unquote cardio. And so I just am always kind of the approach of let's just save that. Let's just save that until the very end when it's like we can't drop food anymore, not without this person just passing out, let's kind of keep that cardio for then, and I kind of like to get those bikini competitors and even small figure competitors to a certain extent. Let's get them off the treadmill. Let's get them off the treadmill. Let's get them off the stair climber during the off season. We can track steps, establish a baseline. Okay, here's where, your minimum amount of steps can be were you not to gain weight. And then that's a tool that we've got available to us where, we couldn't possibly get our calories any lower, but now we can kind of get our steps up. We can get some cardio in, and a lot of times that'll kind of get things kind of moving because like Bert said, there's going to be times when, especially when you're a smaller human, you're going to have to really dig. And you don't want to have to do that with food if you can help it, if you got that another little gear that you got available.
One last note on that, those figures that were given, I think it's something that I'm going to try to do a better job of, is to just perhaps put out content and things that are a little bit more catered towards just females, and I think specifically that division, because in regards to a lot of the resources, like quite often it's so limited. It's like it's hard enough to find good information like in the fitness world as is, and then like that section there, it's like whoa, it's like it's scary sometimes. So so I guess everything we talk about here that just is like for just the general physique athlete definitely applies to you if you are a bikini athlete. And then I guess just finally, I have to say it, it's kind of out there. I feel guilty if I didn't. And it's because I think you might not think of this like when you first start off, or maybe even from our perspective but like the drug use, I think, especially when it comes to bikini athletes, is sometimes it's a little bit too normalized, where like it takes place like during their first prep before the athlete has no idea what they're signing up for. So I just want to say that, hey, you don't need to use, you can just wait a little bit longer, and you'd be quite surprised in regards to like what you can get out of yourself. And it's a huge freaking decision. And I think especially when it comes to females, there's a lot of small print, even when it comes to like things like just Anavar, like you hear that it's just Anavar, and it's like Anavar, and like just how like, I mean, it's they use it on people who are terminally ill. Like this is powerful stuff, and especially with females, like they're so sensitive to these androgens where you might get things that you didn't sign up for, and quite often they're not reversible. So yeah, take the time to learn. Honestly, to me to anyone who's done this long enough and they've done it the drug-free way, that's always the funnest part. It's like discovering something new every year that you can apply to your training, that you're like, ooh, once I'm doing this now and I'm going to get all these gains, and seeing that happen, and then rinsing and repeating that process. Like there's a lot of fun in that. So be patient with yourself, and we'll try to do a better job on our end and just ensuring you that this is information is also applicable to you guys as well.
Can I ask why you think bikini athletes are targeted? I don't say target, or like when you said it's often that they'll hop on whatever substances sooner. Like, why are they offered that their first year? Why do you think it's different?
Because they're like the freshmen on campus quite often relative to everyone else, you know? So they're all wide-eyed and like, yes, you know, I just, you know, they haven't been around that gym culture quite often nearly as long, you know? Okay. So they haven't had that girlfriend that, hey, you know, decided to just take a little Annie and, you know, and like and 3 years later, it's like, she's like, yeah. So yeah, I think that's the main reason. I think also, I'd say when I look at my female and my male athletes, like my male athletes tend to be a little bit more skeptical, whereas I have to quite often like tell my female athletes like, hey, I need you to just, you can't be about the yes sir, about the yes sir, about the yes sir. Like, you need to ask questions. You know, I want to hear more about your preferences, and I want you to be part of this. You know, whereas like with the dudes, it's just something that I see a little bit more often. Where it's, if anything,
okay.
Yeah.
So like us, like it tends to be that a female's a little more like, hey, just tell me what to do because I'm new here, you know, blah blah blah. Whereas a dude's like, let me learn this shit. I got this. It's okay.
So the one thing that makes guys, I think, a little bit more, sometimes like that was me. It's like I you know, like I was late to ask for help. You know, I was a little bit more stubborn in some ways. Like that one thing that can sometimes hold us back. I think when it comes to this, kind of helps us out a little bit.
Okay.
You know, yeah.
Okay. So it seems like Emma, a lot of your assumptions in your question or your questions show that there are a lot of assumptions that are really common, but we find aren't necessarily true. They just are more marketed as the more common, you know, whatever.
Yeah.
Okay. And to put it succinctly, we don't really treat our bikini athletes, and so it sounds like the only difference actually is like that after they've been in the gym for a long time with a symmetrical program, when they decide on a division, we might change the volume to sway a body part or two a little bit more than others, but for the most part, nothing else is different.
Yeah,
okay.
Exactly. Yeah.
Cool. Way to go, guys. All right. Question 5. This is Akeem. I believe it's Akiem. So I'm gonna say that's what Akeem asks. Would dropping calories every 4 to 6 weeks during a deload for 5 to 7 days, then going back up to maintenance during the training block for 4 to 5 months be a good plan to lose about 10 pounds of fat? Or would just going on a straight 4-week diet be better for muscle and strength retention with the goal of losing this weight and keeping it off long term? So do I create a deficit every few weeks during my deload, or do I just diet for a few weeks straight if the goal is 10 pounds off and keeping it off in the long term? I think, Brad, you should go. I haven't heard from you in a while.
Help me out a little bit. It says when dropping calories every 4 to 6 weeks during a deload for 5 to 7 days.
Yeah, so this is what I think happens. He has a deload every 4 to 6 weeks. It lasts about a week, 5 to 7 days, right? And during that deload, can I drop below maintenance and then come back up? So essentially, every time I deload every 4 to 6 weeks, that's when I want to hit my caloric deficit, is what it sounds like.
Okay. All right. And then he'll just do that 1 week.
Yep. And then back up
out of
for
his
another
4 to 5 weeks.
And then back down, back up.
Gotcha. Okay. All right.
Or 4 weeks straight of dieting.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Now I'm seeing it. Okay. So first of all, the former of those two, dropping calories for only a week, out of your training block that is 4 to 5 months, is going to be dreadfully slow. I mean, that's going to be dreadfully slow because you're really going to be looking at 4 to 5 months. Let's say 4 months, that's 16 weeks. So in a 17-week block, you're in a deficit for 1 week, if I'm understanding that correctly.
No. Wait, 1 week of a 17-week block. Every 4 weeks, there's a deficit week. So
Okay.
maintenance,
So he's got
maintenance, deficit, maintenance,
deficit.
maintenance, deficit.
Deficit. Okay. So in his 16-week block, he was going to end up being in a deficit 4 weeks. Okay. Gotcha. Gotcha.
Or a little more,
So,
like you said, 4 to 6 weeks between deloads. So
yeah. Yeah, gotcha. Okay. So there again, I mean, still it's not going to be as slow as 1 week out of 16, but you're still looking at a deficit for 4 weeks out of 16. And I mean, either A, you're going to have a really deep deficit, that 1 week, or you're just going to have to settle for some very minimal weight/fat loss, during that period of time. Now, his alternative is, would just going on a straight 4-week diet be better for muscle and strength retention? So we've kind of got like really two opposite ends of the spectrum. We've got a minimal deficit, which obviously is going to be better for muscular retention, but minimal fat gains, or fat loss.
Yeah,
minimal fat loss. I mean, we're talking like grams. And then obviously the other end of the spectrum is, okay, we diet 4 weeks hard. Now we're going to be losing more muscle. There's not going to be as much muscle retained, but weight loss and fat loss is going to be better, right? So with this gentleman, I mean, he wants to lose 10 pounds of fat, and it sounds like he wants to like just keep it off.
Yeah.
I think somewhere in the middle there probably might not be a bad idea.
Yeah, and for the listeners, I think what Brad's getting at is 10 pounds in 4 weeks is very extreme for most people. Like if he said, I want to lose 5 pounds, Brad's answer would be a little different as to where the 4 weeks is a little intense or not.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, and I mean, I think I know where he's getting at with periodizing his diet and kind of periodizing his phases of deficit versus maintenance. But I think that the way that he's thinking about it is a little bit too much, kind of in absolutes. And what we always want to kind of do is we want to say, okay, we want to be in this overall weekly deficit, but that doesn't mean that all 7 days has to be in a deficit, right? We like to periodize things where we have a couple days at maintenance, maybe even a slight surplus. And then those other days are where the deficit comes in, that we get the weekly deficit that we're after. So we get those little mini diet breaks every week. And then, if the deficit is, say, 2,000 calories a week, we run that for 5, 6, 7 weeks. Then we have a diet break where every day is at maintenance, something like that. But, usually our diet breaks are not like 4 to 5 months, right? So, yeah, if I'm understanding things, it's just there's too much of opposite ends of the spectrum, and where we want to kind of be is kind of more so in the middle, to where it's not like we're actually at maintenance for 4 to 5 months. We're at maintenance for like a week to something like that. So, yeah, I don't think I answered that question very well, but
I think you gave some good insights as to why those two very opposite things both sound a little more ineffective than a lot of other options that I'm sure y'all are going to provide too. But no, I think it helps.
Because if you're only in a deficit for 4 out of 16 weeks, muscular retention is going to be great.
Right.
But
you
not
might
going to
not
be
lose
much in the
any
way of
fat.
fat loss. And it's going to take a long time to lose that 10 pounds that you're after. Whereas on the other end of the spectrum, if you're dieting hard for 4 weeks straight, no diet breaks, no high days, no nothing. Now you've got the other end of the spectrum, to where it's like, okay, fat loss is probably going to be pretty darn good, but there's probably going to be a lot of, or at least more muscle than we want to have disappear with that. So,
yeah,
like I said, I didn't do a very good job, but I'm going to trust that I got some good insight in there.
Yeah. Go ahead, Bert.
Okay. Well, he said two things that aren't exactly the same. Since I wouldn't be dissecting it like this, but like my dude's, he's
no, that's a good point though. I mean,
he's
that's
specific about things.
Yeah.
So losing 10 pounds and then losing 10 pounds of fat, it's like not the same thing. Like if you lose 10 pounds of fat, chances are, man, you probably lost like 13, 14 pounds. Kind of depending on the person.
Word.
Because it's kind of like when you gain what is it? I think it's for every 3 or 4 pounds that you go up, like either one of those pounds, again, depending on the individual, is going to be lean body mass and
possibly
muscle.
yeah.
So you lose it on the way down too. It works
Yeah.
both ways. It can be like blood volume, your GI tract, all that stuff. So, but in this case, let's just say it's 10 pounds of fat, like 10 pounds of fat. Because 10 pounds to me, especially a guy his size, 5'11", 200 pounds, we can make that work. You'll probably, honestly, just from food bulk, like your first week, you'll probably end up losing like 4 pounds, maybe even a little bit more. So, let's just say, he wants to lose about 10 pounds of body fat. Wants an effect similar to that. Honestly, in this case, it's just like, just pull the Band-Aid. Like, just go with it. Like, especially if you are willing to be this dedicated to the point where you're going to diet only during your deloads and then the rest is kind of like maintenance and hold. It's like you try to sell that plan to most people and be like, no, like that's so long and dragged out. So I think he must have he's built up an amount of just willpower at this point, where it's like, we can just get that done in 5 weeks and then get back to gaining. You want to rock it for a little bit, maybe, I don't know, but we can get there relatively quickly. And in case you do want to gain, we can get right back into progressing like right afterwards. As opposed to, that's just so much dead time, like not progressing. Like
and he says he wants to lose the weight and keep it off long term. So I think it's more like I want a little more of a beach bod for a while. Yeah,
even for someone where I'm kind of worried about the pace, that might be that's a whole lot of discipline in its own way. If it was one of those things where he kind of wants to like just feel it out and like just make sure he's patient with himself, I think it's a lot easier to maybe lose 10 pounds and instead of doing it in like 4 or 5 weeks or even 6 weeks, like give yourself twice the time, give yourself 10 weeks, something like that. And
get a couple breaks or high days in there.
Yeah, problem solved. You can be more loose with it too. You know, life is like good and pliable. Because that plan there, it's like, it's almost, I know what he's trying to do. He's trying to be gentle on himself, but it's almost so dragged. He's dragging it too long to the point where it's like, that's hard, man. I look at that plan, I'm like, man, that'd be hard for me. Yeah. That's a lot of time of being like on, because man, during those maintenance blocks, like you have to be in maintenance because you only have 5-7 days to basically lose fat afterwards. So, I'd say, give yourself anywhere between 8 to 12 weeks and have at it, man.
Okay, let me ask this question a smidge differently for each of y'all, or maybe it'd be a similar answer for both, but if Akeem just rolled up and said, hey, we have a little context here from his form. So I'm a dude, I'm 28 years old, I'm 5'11", I weigh 200 pounds, and I'd like to weigh 190, and I'd like to chill there for the foreseeable future, at least a year or two. Coach, open-ended, how would you like me to lose 10 pounds so that I can keep it off? Now, can y'all give me what you would do?
Yeah,
Brad?
Yeah, for sure. Especially with him, as meticulous as he is, he's got in here, that he burns 3,250 calories per day. He's been at it for 10 years. He's got his macros in here. If he wants to get down to 190, I mean, he's got a pretty healthy metabolism there. He's taking in well over 22,000 calories a week. Well, we can just kind of quantify things as 1 pound equals 3,500 calories. Go down to whatever that is, 19,000, 18,500 calories per week. Divvy it up however you want to so that you get your highs and your low days there. And then do that for 10 weeks. And 9 times out of 10, you lose 9 to 11 pounds when you program a pound of a week deficit like that. It may not be perfectly symmetrical. One week you might lose half a pound. Another week you might gain a half a pound, and then another week you might lose 2 pounds. It kind of goes that way. But yeah, that's definitely something, especially with the numbers that he's got there, because he's pretty in touch with how his body works quantifiably. That would be pretty easy to do. And even if he didn't quantify things, like if he just wanted to go from 200 to 190, and like Bert said, not all that's going to be fat. That's 10 pounds of body weight. And so some of it's going to be muscles, a lot of it's going to be fat, some of it's just going to be, kind of fluids that we end up eliminating in the form of glycogen and things like that. But even if he was not quantifying things, I'd say, okay, how many meals do you eat a day? Okay, how full are you after each of those meals? Okay, how much protein do you take in a day? Okay, so from now on, I want you to cut out one of those meals or not be as full and keep your protein the same, bring it up, bring it down, what have you, So we don't even have to necessarily quantify things as meticulously as he does. We just kind of use our fullness signals. Don't be as full after your meals, If you're eating 6 meals a day, man, maybe get one or two of those, and then just watch it happen unquantifiably.
Yeah. Okay.
I'd look at his dieting history. I think that's where I'd start at. It's like, so, because it might be one of those, it might be these 10 pounds he's been trying to lose forever. Because like most people who know like their stuff that well, they know how to do it. Like it's pretty straightforward, but it's and who knows, maybe he's willing to be that patient because it is something you see with people who've been through past dietary trauma where it's like, okay, now I'm going to be so slow that you create your own form of trauma from the fat loss from it being so like long now, So I think you need to get a little reading on their fat loss history when their last few attempts, which ones were successful, which ones weren't. Obviously some of the things that might have worked for them, it's like, hey, I'm completely okay with borrowing some of that. You might spot a few things in their system that you're like, oh, this is why you keep messing up, man. Like this is what keeps getting in your way. So, look at that first, and from there, you definitely got to use that data to your advantage and take what he's applied, what's worked. What I think would probably be a better something maybe we should try for this next go around if I see that they're fit for fat loss, and kind of just work it that way. But usually guys like this are wonderful because they have so much data, like probably data in abundance. They have spreadsheets that look better than our spreadsheets,
Yeah, no, all good points. I think y'all did a good job, especially because this first question was like, should I do this or that? And y'all were like, neither of those, which is helpful though, because I think too, like especially when you care this much, like I know I'm guilty of that too. Like obviously he cares. As like listener, just so y'all know, he provided us a lot of data in this question, or with this question, not data, context. Right? Context, like his previous weight history, blah blah. So like he's been tracking a lot, but I know that because that tends to be my personality when I care about something is to over track too. And then it's like you get these blinders on where you're like, okay, I read that these are a couple like you forget that there's other options. And so that's one of the beauties of coaching is I bet if he was here talking to either on a Skype, he'd be like, oh yeah, like of course there's other ways,
Yeah.
So anyways, I think y'all did great with that.
Conflict of interest. It's so hard when it's on yourself, right?
Yeah. Okay. Ooh, I like this question. I mean, I like them all, but here we go. This is Carl. Carl asks, I want to work with 3DMJ, but I don't have any competitive goals. I'm fairly certain that the stage or platform aren't for me, but I'd still like help maximizing my physique for personal reasons. I've been lifting seriously and what I think is intelligently for over 5 years now, following various programs for about a year at a time. My body weight has been pretty stable the last 2 or 3 years. For the past 16 months, I've been on the basic intermediate program from the muscle and strength pyramids. While I still enjoy it and feel like I have maintained my muscle, I'm feeling a bit plateaued in terms of visual changes, and I'd like to see where individual coaching could take me. So my questions are, how do the coaches create a hypertrophy program that is different than the pyramids? And what are some of the ways I could benefit from coaching beyond a training program to push results over the next year? So it seems he's sensible. For the listeners, the pyramid is the intermediate's a pretty, I'd say moderate to low volume, very symmetrical hypertrophy program. And so how do y'all think y'all could help this guy if it seems like he's been doing pretty damn good for a few years, but he feels a little stuck?
Yeah, and that's kind of a cool question. He's kind of asking, what is it that we do? kind of,
Well, yeah, and I also,
and not just,
he sounds, well, if he has the pyramids and he's following these and obviously can stick to a program for a long time, like, he's probably like, I feel like I understand the material and I'm doing it, but I still feel a little stuck. Like, yeah, what is he missing?
Yeah.
They all provide. Yeah.
That's kind of a unique question. I kind of like that. It's kind of a more of a coaching related question than how do I get my gains? So, Bert, you want me to just run with it since I've already kind of started?
Sure. So, man, I guess
he said
pyramids,
sure, and then he talks.
Okay. So I'll you know what? It's like the pyramids when you go over the principles and what you should prioritize and all that. It's kind of like those are the instructions on like how to make a sandwich, man. And then the programs are kind of like, this is what it should look like. It's like you don't want the tomatoes on the outside. Like that's just that's messed up. But I'll tell you what, from like I've written like in generic, I think people think bad when they hear that word. Generic's doesn't mean bad. It just means it's fundamentally sound, and it basically as you write it, you're like, what doesn't get me in trouble, and like you think of like all these scenarios that you can think of, and you put that on a piece of paper, and you're like, okay, I think this will have most people covered. This will at least get them on the right track, and it's a good start. And then like literally a day later, you come back and you erase. You're like, oh no, but how about this, dude? So anyhow, it's really freaking hard to write those. It's so hard. So generic is not bad. There's a lot of work goes into writing a fundamentally sound generic program, where you're being thoughtful in regards to like who might be reading this and like all the different profiles, right? So, so you're kind of limited at the end because, again, like everyone's situation is just a little different. It can be a lot of things, it can be like your injury history, like this area here you keep snapping up, but maybe equipment limitations, right? Maybe the way you grow is very asymmetric in this unique way. So the biggest thing when you get a coach is that like we can really, really like get down and dirty and like figure out how you like your sandwich, and I can make you the nicest sandwich possible, basically. So yeah, that's the biggest thing. It's just the fact that, and that's probably, I think, the one part that people are the most overwhelmed with, like when we're done with a program, especially with my Skypes, is like I sit here and I'm just like asking. And it's almost them doing more of the talking than I am, to be honest, especially during our first Skype consultation, because, I want to make sure this thing is like as specific as it can be for like this person. And even then, I'll tell you what, after the first session, I'd say I get about 80% right. So that's same old like 80-20 rule, where it's like 80% of it I get right. And then there's still this 20% where it's like, okay, we have to tighten up on that. And that's an ongoing process. But yeah, it's customizable. I think that's the biggest thing.
Yeah. Go ahead, Brad.
Yeah. Yep. That's pretty much what I was going to say, because, obviously these programs, they're only, they have finite kind of beginnings and ends. You know what I mean? And it's going to vary from person to person, but you can only recycle a 5-day program, over and over again so often, until you're just kind of either stuck in a rut, or your body's just totally adapted, or you're just tired of it. And so a lot of times with my Skypes, what I'll end up spending the most time doing is explaining to somebody, okay, this is what I want you to do for the next 20 weeks. The first 4 weeks will be this. The second 4 weeks will be this. The third 4 weeks will be this. And so just kind of giving them 20 weeks of homework, a lot of times that alone will take me 30 minutes. And then making sure that they understand it and why they're doing it, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so that's really what this gentleman is going to get if he works with 3DMJ, is we're going to take this program and we're going to customize it to him, and we're going to take it through different phases. Hence periodization, right? We're going to take you through a period of this. We're going to take through a period of this. Sometimes the volume never changes. Sometimes the volume, I should say, actually, the volume through sets never changes, but we're going to increase intensity a little bit. We might bring RPE down. We might bring RPE up. We might change one whole day to where this day has a lower RPE and we run a phase like that. So that's always the thing that I'm always thinking about. Like Bert, where have you been? I want to hear, what has your training been like over the last 10 years? Okay, what's it look like over the last 3 months? Okay, what's it look like over the last 3 weeks? All right, here's where we need to go now. 4 weeks later, we do this. 8 weeks later, we do this, etc. I'm always thinking big picture. Big picture is how are we going to take this program and run it through all of the different, kind of periodized principles that we want to, so that you're maximizing. And this is where it even gets even more fun and more tricky. Maybe you want to maximize hypertrophy. Well, we're going to have to make sure we consider that as we're going through these phases. Maybe you don't care about hypertrophy. Maybe you want to squat 500 pounds. Well, we're going to have to make sure that we kind of focus on those principles as we're going through all of these different phases and all of these different, kind of periodized blocks of training, right? And so that's really, at least that's kind of what I kind of gathered that Carl was asking, is that, okay, here's what I'm doing and I know it works, but what would you guys do for me outside of this?
Yes. And
what would I do if I kind of knew and could predict what Berto would do for me or what Brad would do for me, And so, yeah, that's kind of what you're probably missing, is instead of just kind of recycling the same 5-day-a-week program, which is fine, especially if you really dig it, but you have to kind of take those principles that happen during the week and make those changes kind of happen globally over the course of months, and then change those other principles, make that happen for, months. And then, sometimes you just got to kind of run a transitional block and sometimes get away from that program and do something else just for freshness, And then, of course, you want to make sure that your transitional block is kind of supporting your goals, whatever that is, the 500-pound squat or maximizing your hypertrophy or, whatever. But that's when it gets fun. And that's when I could really talk for days and days and days, because that's where I feel like a real coach is, well, okay, this is what you want. Here's what you need to do it, and then stretch that out over half a year of homework,
Let me pull this out to like a less, like a more basic question than that. Not that, that's a great prompt, but to ask it a different way, what is your approach if you have a weight stable, intermediate, strong dude? He's intermediate. He hasn't gone through a lot of cycles, just been maintaining for a long time. And he says, I want to put on more muscle, right? And I've been following this program for a year or 2 years. I've been hitting like body weight's the same. I'm pretty strong. How do I make myself look different? Because I've looked the same for the last 2 or 3 years on this program that seems fine.
Yeah.
Like,
which we get that a lot.
Right. Tell me how you deal with that.
From our athletes. Yeah, we get that a lot from our athletes. And Bert, let me ask you, intermediate, solid, strong dude, what's the chances that they can recomp at that phase?
So body weight stable, you said?
Yeah.
Yeah. Hasn't dieted in over 2 years. I'm just making shit up now. Hasn't dieted in over 2 years. So has been maintaining, looks good, decently beach appropriate for the gram. But now
obviously got a good amount of muscle. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So now I want to take it to the next level. I don't want to compete or anything. I just want to see some changes over the next year or two. What can you help me with?
Yeah. Man, I'd say good place to start. I think is we'd have to get rid of the weight stable part,
Word.
I think you can do that at first, but then there is a point where even if you're a female, it doesn't have to be a crap ton of weight, but it's like, hey, this is what we usually weigh. If we just slowly over the course of the next 6 to 10 months gained, 5 to 7% of our current body weight. So
get a little fluffy for a little bit.
Yeah. So have that energy on your side. Because it gets to a certain point where it's like, any muscle past this point, it's like really to your body, it's an extracurricular,
Yeah.
So they need to have the funds for it. I'd say probably once we have that going, and quite often that in itself fixes a lot. I'd say the next step would be like, hey, let's look at basically everything you're doing in the gym once we've selected what movements we're going to use, and let's see how you're doing it. Because quite often it's like you'll see it's like, oh, okay, that's why your calves look this way. It's because this is how you do them. Okay, this is why your glutes haven't grown a whole lot past year one. It's because this is how you perform this movement or that movement. Hey, your hinge sucks. Oh, hey, maybe that movement doesn't fit you. I think I have a better movement that's going to fit the way you're put together just a bit better. So first things first, it's like I think you need to have energy on your side. And then it's like, okay, now I took care of the programming. Let's just split the hairs in regards to like what's going on within the X's and O's, because man, you could have a really good program, but if like there's something off when it comes to the way exercises are executed, that's really going to impact how much we do get out of that program. Right. I'd say that you have someone with like just really good form in regards to whatever the objective is that they're trying to get out of their strength training, where their form is like really good but the program is meh. That person actually makes more progress than the person who has a fantastic program, but there's enough things wrong with their lifting technique. I think over longer periods of time, our form Nazi would probably make better progress. But yeah, those are probably the two biggest common places that I pick up on. And obviously, just to throw that in there, now more than ever, I think, especially since because a lot of the whole initial anxiety that came from meal timing, part of it was like, you got to keep your metabolism going. There was that myth, but the other one was just like for the sake of protein. And I think more than ever, you see strength athletes far beyond like whatever I never thought I'd see it get this bad. You see a lot of athletes, and when it comes to their protein intake and maybe how they distribute it, it's just not nearly like the way as if it's not the way they're not maximizing their body comp just via that,
Okay.
So yeah, that's usually those are my go-tos.
Word.
Yeah, and Berto pretty much took the words out of my mouth, because somebody that's an intermediate, recomping is definitely possible. But when you're talking recomping, you're not talking like in terms of a couple months. You're talking in terms of like 6 or 8 months. When we see these tremendous before and after body recomposition changes, one of two things happened. Either they dieted way, way, way down, and then now that they've come back up again, their body looks a whole lot different. And that took the course of like an 8 or 10 month prep. In order for that to happen, or the opposite happens, good, strong, muscular person, and they end up putting on 20, 25, 30 pounds, all while training, because training is the driving factor that builds muscle. And then they diet back down again, and now they look dramatically different. So that recomp can happen, but we're not talking a short period of time. This is stuff that's got to happen in phases, and it's got to happen over the course of like 8 or 10 months.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, for Zach here, I totally agree. He's got to get a little bit fluffy. And
Carl,
I think is it Carl? Oh, shoot.
Question
Sorry,
6,
Carl.
all
My
good.
bad. I'm too far ahead. But some of this recent literature that we've got, kind of on how much of a surplus that you need to be to actually put on muscle has been super enlightening, and really has made me do a total 180 from my gain-taining approach that even I used to have like back in 2015. When we're finding out that the people with the most amount of natural muscle on the planet are sumo wrestlers, that kind of tells me I'm going to have to get some pretty good weight on me in order to get that muscle on me, especially if I'm an intermediate, right? So yeah, you got to get that going up, okay? And then all the while, to put a little bit more of a example on Bert's talk about exercise form, I didn't have lats for the first probably 10 years of my bodybuilding career.
10?
I could I could get shredded, good chest, good quads, good delts, no lats. I looked like just a pole up there, a shredded muscular popsicle stick. And it was basically because I wasn't really using my lats on a lot of my back work. I'm doing the hitching and I'm doing the swinging and I'm moving the whole stack, but I'm leaning to parallel to the ground and then bouncing into it, And so, I wish that something like the lifting library existed when I was in that 10-year hiatus of like no lat growth. You know what I mean? And then finally in 2008, I actually start initiating the movements with my lats, making sure that I'm not using momentum. No longer am I using the whole stack. And then boom, 2011, 2014, finally I've got V-taper. I've actually got lats, and so that's kind of an example of what Bert's talking about is sometimes, I was a solid intermediate, thought I was doing everything right, but just that one hole in my game was really kind of making my physique not look as good as it probably could have if I would have just attended that one little hole.
Liftinglibrary.com.
Did I put a nice bow on it there?
Yeah, liftinglibrary.com. That's your bow. Okay. No, that was really good. I know a lot of people have that question because damn it, year-round beach lean is so good for the gram, y'all.
Yeah.
It's so
you
good.
know what? And recomp party. Here's the thing: when it comes to like recomp changing the way you look, nothing is going to impact that the way gaining muscle will.
Yeah.
So if you maximize that, it's crazy how.
Because if you just keep going,
so much better.
if he just kept going 5 years later, he'd look a little better than he does now. Just muscle maturity, weights would go up. But if it's like if you invest a year, you might get 5 years of that other type of gains in like 9-10 months or something, right?
And it's funny because a lot of these folks that want to recomp so bad, it's like that's not the advice they'd give like their peeps who maybe are asking them for advice. Like for all I know, maybe Carl has a girlfriend that's like she won't get off the cardio machine. He's like, "Come on, baby, come lift a little weights. I guarantee you it's gonna work so much better." So yeah. Again, we get in our own way, and even us, like we still do ourselves, and that's why we do rely on each other for help when we get these weird ideas that sound brilliant on paper, but
or in our heads, really just in our heads, because we're good at moving the paper to match our heads. That's the thing too.
Oh yeah, exactly. Very true.
Okay, last question. Question number 7. This one is from Zach. Zach asked, pretty general question here, but I'm wondering what to do if after your cut, you go too hard on your bulk and end up putting on 10 to 15 pounds in a month or two. Should I cut again to get to a reasonable starting point? ? So for the listeners, Zach has provided that he is 5'9", about 190, but he finished his mini cut a couple months ago where he got down to about 177. So successful cut, bounced right back up. And he's asking if he should cut again.
Zach should go and visit the free recovery diet program on www.3dmjvault.com.
We're just going to have a commercial for the rest of this podcast.
But it's free. It's free.
Yeah, that course is free. But if you want to pay not a lot of dollars, we also have the post-contest recovery seminar. Anyways, I'm going to stop plugging our stuff. However, what do we have for Zach here? I guess I'm answering for us. That's not what I mean to do though. But I do have some questions, right? Like it would be nice to know, like, was this a prep cut? Was this just a mini cut? It would also be nice to know if that was your first cut or if you've done this before. It would also, I don't know. There's just all the context we have is that. Go ahead.
Yep.
And how what?
Yep, and how lean did he get? That's another part, kind of a context that is really important. Because
177, but you're right. It depends how trained he is. We would need a picture to see if he was actually lean or just.
Because if he got shredded at 177, 5'9", he probably didn't get shredded, but you could still get pretty darn lean at 177 and 5'9", And if that was the case, I'd say, you know what, 10 to 15 pounds, there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
You've basically gotten yourself back to normal and can now start building muscle again, you know.
True.
But yeah, I don't think that I would do much. I think I would just go with it. I don't know if I would start cutting again. Then you start worrying about that whole yo-yo dieting where you're losing mass.
Exactly.
You know,
Alberto
putting on a
doesn't
little
like
bit
the
of
yo-yos.
fat.
He gets upset.
No,
losing mass
usually the
again.
second one is worse.
Yeah.
And then
Yes,
the third one's even worse than that
exactly.
one.
Yes.
And you get stubborn. You're like, no, this is the time. And like literally that's what you see with like what happens to like most adults nowadays. It's like they're like, this is gonna be it. Obviously, they're not like Zach where they're dedicated. They know how to apply these principles to induce fat loss. But for most adults, like about every year it happens.
I also suck and didn't read. He does say I finished a mini cut about 2 months ago, or I got down to 177.
So it's a mini cut. It was a mini cut. It wasn't a contest prep.
So not even a prep. Yeah.
Yeah. So you know what? With him, it's like, okay, you're probably not gonna cut. We need to go back and sort out what happened exactly. Like, why did this happen? We need to retrace our steps. And maybe it's not even anything fundamentally wrong with the dietary setup. Maybe, who knows, he just might have a history of way too much dieting or certain methods of dieting that, still have him a little messed up there. So I would tell him that, hey, you know what, this is one of those where it's like you live and you learn. What we can do now is like charge ourselves up in regards to fortifying you so that next time we do go through a fat loss phase, you're more likely to not just get there, but get there and still have a lot left over and not have this sort of response afterwards. And then also, like in the meantime, it's not like we're just going to sit around and do anything. It's like, hey, you'll have an even better version of that 177 that you reached, or what have you. So,
Yeah.
So I definitely will not send him back in there. You just got your butt kicked by that cut. It's like, hey, let's just chill for a minute and I'll let you know when I think you're ready. That hardly ever works. I have not seen, I'd say because this was probably something that I was not as good about putting my foot down with my athletes when something like this would happen. And I think partially a big part of it was also like the methods I used back then. I definitely say that it's a little bit more crude and archaic, but weren't we all? We were still top of the line for back then. Whether it was 2010, 2011.
Yeah,
For what we knew.
we're
We've all
top
come a
of the
long way.
line. Yeah.
But yeah, I've had it happen a few times. I'm like, all right, we can go back and redo it. And honestly, I'd say that success rate is probably less than 10%. And it's always thinking that you're the exception that gets people into a lot of trouble when it comes to this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, that's really, if he says, was that one, was 13 pounds? Okay. 13 pounds. Well, it's like, one, was your mini cut too aggressive? Like, should you have done it anyways if you went right back up that quick? Right? Because that's like that amount of weight putting back on that quick is a common range for a recovery diet. But that's because you messed yourself up for 6 months plus or whatever.
Yeah.
But
Mm-hmm.
from a mini cut to come back up, it's like, should we have done it? Was it too aggressive? Are you trying to get down to a place that your body doesn't want to be? I don't know.
But yeah, I think regardless of what the answers to any of those questions
Good
are,
point.
don't start cutting again.
Yeah,
don't
you
start
should not
cutting
diet again. Yeah.
Because you're just, it's like Bert said, we kind of have that evidence now. It's like you're going to lose more lean tissue,
Yeah.
So yeah, you don't want to start, contradicting what it is that you're trying to do every day in the gym.
Yeah. Because you're obviously not recovered if you gain that much that fast after the mini cut.
Which is actually a off topic from his question, but still great kind of in line. A lot of times with our bodybuilders, my initial intent is getting the person back to normal with the approach to how they eat their food, their relationship with food, getting kind of back to normal, the way that most athletes nourish themselves. Once that's attended to, we'll start worrying about programming weight gain and, et cetera. But my initial, a lot of times, is to say, okay, you know what? as quickly as possible, let's get away from you know, basically feeling the need to eat all the freaking time, even though you've already got a food baby.
Yeah.
You know, let's get away from, okay, you need to eat, you know, so much fat, so much carbs, so much, you know, calories, this many calories. Let's get away from all that. Let's get you back to normal, to where you're eating like an athlete eats, maybe tracking your protein only, but when you're full, you stop.
Yeah.
You know, and then let's start thinking about, okay, now let's start kind of paying attention to what weight is doing. You know what I mean? But that's kind of it's off topic, but it's a nice little
I don't think that's
tangent.
off topic. Yeah, because it all goes together. I mean, obviously the relationship with food is not where it should be for maintaining. Because if he cuts again, then he will be in a worse place for maintaining or whatever. Because obviously the intent was to cut and then like not gain it right back. So
yeah,
if he did on accident, then his food behaviors aren't in alignment with that being a good maintenance place.
Yeah.
All right.
At least not now.
Yeah. Just not yet. Also not yet. Sometimes that shit just takes time. Okay. That was it for the questions. I'm done asking all things. What do y'all have to say?
Well, first of
Thank
all,
you to
thanks to
everyone.
all these folks that wrote these questions in. You know, that sometimes it's hard to find good questions, and props to you, Andrea, for digging up and kind of, you know, spending all your hard earned hours looking this stuff up.
I like
so
digging
thank
for
you to
them.
you as well.
It's important. Yeah. It helps us too to think about like what we should put on our shows, and like Alberto said in the middle, he's like, oh, I want to make more bikini content because
Yes,
the assumptions
good
in it.
point.
So it does help us to helps us help you.
Hey, new IG handle, Bikini Birdo 2021.
Oh my God, someone's going to take it. You better hurry up before this podcast comes out. Go ahead, sign up for a new Gmail so you can snag
You
that
are
bird.
so good with those, man.
All right, we'll talk to y'all next time.
What's going on, 3DMJers? Eric Helms here. Thanks for listening to our podcast. I just want to take a second to tell you about MASS, Monthly Applications in Strength Sport. This is a monthly research review that I put out with Greg Nuckols, Dr. Mike Zerdos, and Dr. Eric Trexler. We cover the most up-to-date, peer-reviewed research in the world of strength and physique sport that's directly relevant to your practice as a coach or an athlete. We provide our reviews in written format, but also, since you enjoy our podcast, in audio roundtable reviews where we discuss the research in depth. Finally, we also do video concept reviews where we cover a broader topic in video format for your learning. For fitness professionals, you can take quizzes on MASS content and earn continuing education credits for most of the biggest certifying bodies in the fitness industry. If you want to sign up and get a subscription, head over to 3dmusclejourney.com and click on the products tab. Thanks for your time. Thanks for listening.